I'm going to discuss a poem by Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Night. Whose woods these are, let me read it. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's a sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. The poem is composed of 4 stanzas. Each line has 4 lines, and it's iambic pentameter, ta-tum, ta-tum, ta-tum. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village. So tetrameter, 4 beats per line. And the rhyme scheme is A, no, though, here, no. So A, B, A. You start with the letter A and then you work your way through. So no, though, and snow all rhyme, right? So give the letter A to no. That means though gets A and snow gets A. So A, B, A. That's the rhyme scheme of the first stanza. And the rhyme scheme of the second stanza would be C, no, sorry, queer rhymes with here, so it would be B, C, B. My little horse must think it queer, farmhouse near. Queer rhymes with here from line, and here was B, letter B in line in stanza 1. So B, C, B. Then stanza 3, he gives his harness bells a shake. Shake rhymes with take, mistake, flake, and lake. So C, D, C. And then stanza 4 is D, 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 D. Everything rhymes. Deep, keep, sleep, sleep. The last 2 lines are identical. And miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So it's iambic tetrameter, 4 stanzas, 4 lines per stanza. Now let's look at the poem. You can read this poem as a glad or sad. Let me read it as a glad poem first. You can imagine somebody out. You have to kind of imagine this, stopping by woods on a snowy evening. So it's snowing. This person is out. Well, let's just read it. Whose woods these are, I think I know. So he comes across some woods, and he says, I think I know what they are. Whose woods he thinks who owns the woods. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house, though, is in the village. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So he's going to stop in the woods and he's going to look at the snow. Let's just imagine that he loves nature. Okay, so he's happy. That's why I says you could think it as a glad poem. He's a nature lover. He's going to watch the woods fill up with snow. Okay, that's a happy sight, right? He enjoys it. My little horse must think it queer. The horse though think it's queer that he's stopping where he is without a farmhouse near. To stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening. So it's very dark outside. And he's stopping between the woods and the frozen lake. And he's just looking at the snow, enjoying the snow. Beautiful. And the horse is like, why are you stopping here? And he's just stopping there because he wants to look at the snow. He loves the scenery. He's happy. And the horse, doesn't understand this. He gives his harness, so the horse gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. Okay, the only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So he loves nature. He's looking at the snow, and he's in the woods, and it's dark. So, but he has promised. He has some. He's on some mission. Maybe he's a doctor. Maybe he's a country doctor, and he's out. He's with his horse. It doesn't say what he's doing. You have to kind of imagine it. We do know he has promises to keep. So he has some. I imagine him kind of as a country doctor, and let's say he's on a house call, and he's got a promise to keep, or maybe he has to get home and look after his daughter or little son or whatever. But he has promises to keep, so he can't just stay out in the snow and enjoy nature. It's a dark evening, though, I guess, so you can't really see that much. Darkest evening of the year. So it's not like he sees a whole lot, because it's dark. But he can, though, see the woods fill up with snow. I mean, even though it's dark, he can see the snow filling up with snow. So that's one way to read it. It's a glad poem. He's happy. He's a nature lover. He would just love to stay there and just look at the scene, the snow. But I have promises to keep. The woods are lovely, dark, and it's lovely, woods are lovely, dark, and deep. But I have promises to keep and miles to. So he's on a long journey. It doesn't say, it doesn't say what the journey is, where he's going or his destination. You can imagine this, and different people have different things they will imagine, but we do know he has promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Miles to go before I sleep, So he's tired. He's on a long journey. He's got many miles to go before he sleeps. He repeats it twice at the end of the poem. Miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go. It emphasizes the long journey he's on. Anyway, that's one way to read it. So I read it as a happy poem. He's a nature lover. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. He's a nature lover, and it's a nice saying. But he can't stay there, He has to get going. And okay, but now we could also read it as a sad poem. I read it the first way I read it is that he's a nature lover. He's happy, but another way you could read it is that he's very sad. It's the darkest evening of the year. That's a symbol of maybe he's depressed, very depressed. And so the way I read it is like, you might think this is weird, but when I go through the poem, it might make a little sense. I kind of think that he's contemplating suicide. The first way I read it, he was very happy. There's no notion of suicide at all. But here, whose woods these are, I think I know. So he's stopping in the woods, and he says, I think I know whose woods these are. His house is in the village, though, so nobody's going to see him. He will not see me stopping here, so it's a private area. And he's just going to watch his woods fill up with snow. Snow is going to cover over the landscape. And snow it can be seen as a symbol of death. It covers over life. You have, when you have snow, whatever plants or vegetation was there is going to be killed, right? It's going to be dead. So the snow is covering over life, and he will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse, he's on a horse. The horse, he's imagining what the horse is thinking. The horse must think it queer that he's stopping without a farmhouse. Now, there's no farmhouse there. So he's stopping out in the woods. And the way I'm reading it this time, he's not to enjoy nature. He's very depressed. It's dark, the darkest evening of the year. That's the last line of stanza 2. The horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake. Again, frozen lake is an image of death. Because lakes are not normally frozen. I mean, they're in constant motion. That's life. But these are frozen lake. And in a sense, he's frozen. Emotionally, he's frozen. He's very depressed. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. Not only literally dark, but dark. The darkness evening of the year is now referring to his own emotions. the horse gives his harness bells a shake. The horse is saying, "Is there?" To ask if there's some mistake. I mean, maybe he's imagining the horse, asking him, maybe you're making a mistake, in thinking of contemplating suicide. It's a mistake. There's life. Life is not all frozen. It's not going to be always dark. Maybe you're making a mistake thinking of suicide. The only other sound's a sweep of easy wind and downy flake. So the horse he imagines a horse, questioning what he's doing. The way I'm reading it is, Frost doesn't tell you he's committing suicide, but you can kind of imagine that he is, because it's the darkest evening of the year. And I'm reading darkness now here as emotional darkness. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. Now he's not reading it as a lover of nature. He's reading it as somebody contemplating suicide. He just wants to become part of the woods. Lovely, dark and deep. Just enter into that darkness and just end everything. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. But one thing that keeps him from committing suicide, or just giving up, is that he has promises to keep. There's somebody in his life that he has a commitment to, and that's what saves him. This is not a good time to commit suicide, to end it all. Even though it's the darkest evening of the year, he's got promises to keep. So that gives him a reason to live. But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. Now, sleep here is not simply, natural sleep where you go to sleep at night. The sleep here is the sleep of death. I have promises to keep. There's people in my life I have commitments to. Maybe a child, maybe a wife, maybe a friend. But I have promises to keep. And miles to go. Miles to go. I have a long life ahead of me. Before I die, This is not the time. But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Anyway, so that's a Robert Frost poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. So there's different ways to read it. I'm sure you could come up with other readings. When you interpret poetry, it's an interpretation. I'm not saying that this is about suicide. I'm saying that's one way to interpret it. The language of the poem leads me to think about that. But also I could also read it as a happy poem, as a glad poem. So which is it? Well, it's neither one. It's both at the same time. I mean, poetry and literature in general can be read in many ways. I mean, it's not like you just this is the meaning of it. If you read it as a glad poem, that's fine. But you should also recognize that you could also read it as a sad poem. What did Frost intend? It really doesn't matter what Frost himself intended. We've got the poem here. The words, as soon as the writer writes it, the poem is no longer in his hands. So let's say when Frost was writing this, he was just thinking of a glad poem. I don't know. I mean, I can't get into his mind. Just got words on a paper. And when a writer writes something down, the writer, in a sense, dies, and just the poem is given to the world, and it's up to the world to interpret it, the reader. Anyway, so that's all I'll say about it. Again, I've given you two interpretations, but if you think about it yourself, you can come with the other ones. Anyway, that's all I'll say for now. Read it yourself and think about it. Come up with your own interpretation.